Good afternoon from London. My name is Vikas Pota, and as you'll be aware if you've watched any of these before, I used this opportunity during COVID to have conversations with people that I've heard of, friends from all over the world, who can add insight and perspective to what's happening in the world of education around COVID. We've had a lot of discussion around the learning loss that has occurred as a result of COVID and school closures, and there's been a lot of people that have talked about various strategies when it comes to mitigating for that. So today I bring on someone whose work is absolutely fascinating, and I was saying earlier today to her that I'm fortunate to have been introduced to their work, and now I'd like to do the same with this audience, because what they do is quite important and critical towards addressing the gaps that exist. Please welcome Susannah Hardyman, CEO of Action Tutoring. Susannah, welcome to this live stream.
Hello, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
So, Susannah, you work. I mean, your name says everything. Action Tutoring, I suppose. You work in the tutoring space. But before we get to talk about your work and what you do and the great stuff around that, tell us a little bit about what your observations are around COVID, and especially when it comes to the inequities that have arisen as a result of it, or at least been amplified in our awareness from this. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, Action Tutoring is an educational charity that exists to tackle the attainment gap that exists in the UK between pupils from poorer backgrounds and their wealthier peers. That attainment gap has been there for many, many years prior to COVID, but what we've found since school closures and lockdown is that those inequalities are further being exacerbated, and what's more, they've become far more on the public's radar. A number of reasons have affected why COVID has particularly had an adverse effect on disadvantaged pupils. Some of it has involved the ability of parents to support with home learning, whether pupils had access to the technology they needed to be able to continue in their studies, their motivation to work without class support and teacher support, and simply the support that schools were able to provide. And what we think that's equated to, and the research points towards, is that pupils from poor backgrounds have actually done very little learning during lockdown. One study estimated that as many as 2 million pupils have done less than an hour a day of studying since lockdown began. And obviously that's going to have big consequences potentially for their future if we can't enable them to catch up quickly.
Susannah, so I mean, and there's lots of estimates and forecasts, economic and otherwise, regarding the devastating impacts of what is happening. And you gave birth to a charity, if I'm not mistaken, called Action Tutoring, and it is a charity. Can you tell us a little bit about where you came up with the idea, and what's happening since? I mean, so when you think about tutoring, you think, I mean, the common perception is that everyone does it. Tell us a little bit more about your work.
Well, you're quite right that tutoring is a booming industry. So latest statistics suggest that in the UK, in London, over 40% of 11 to 16-year-olds have a private tutor.
Wow.
And nationally, the figure is still very high at 1 in 4, 25% having a private tutor at some point during secondary. But I became very passionate about this issue because there's fantastic evidence that tutoring is effective. That's the reason so many parents want it for their children. But there's a fundamental problem that it's very expensive. Nationally, it can easily cost £30–40 an hour. And in London, you get people paying £50–60 an hour for top tutors. So tutoring is a brilliant intervention. It can really support pupils, but it's not necessarily reaching those that need it most. And my passion was to establish an organisation that would bring all the fantastic benefits of tutoring to pupils who wouldn't otherwise afford it. So Action Tutoring works through partnerships with schools. That's how we identify our pupils and deliver our programmes. But all of our work is focused on those eligible at some point in the last few years for free school meals, those eligible for pupil premium. And we particularly also focus on those who are at risk of underachieving in their studies, We just need that extra help that tutoring can give them to bring them back on track.
I mean, so prior to COVID, if I'm not mistaken, you worked with cohorts of kids in a few cities, and it was all person to person, face to face.
That's right.
And then you've had to flip the switch and go online. Tell us about the format that you had, and what gives you confidence that what you're moving towards works.
Well, all of our programs have traditionally been delivered face-to-face with volunteer tutors going into schools and working in places like the school library or across classrooms. We provide structured training and resources for the volunteers to use. We monitor the progress that pupils are making. Our staff work really closely with schools and pupils to ensure we've got high attendance and engagement on the programs. But all of that was happening face-to-face and stopped very abruptly in mid-March when the schools closed. What we then did was develop an online program. It was something we'd actually been talking about strategically for a while, that we wanted to move into being able to offer tutoring online, recognizing that that could help us to get to geographies where perhaps it would be harder to recruit volunteer tutors. And COVID in many ways provided us as an organization with an opportunity to accelerate that. And we ran a pilot program over the summer term with 6 partner schools delivering tutoring online, spent time selecting what we thought would be the best platform that would get us close to face-to-face tutoring as possible. And we're now really excited to be in a position to be able to offer that to all of our partner schools in the autumn if needed, and with a long-term aim to expand to new geographies with it.
And with a specific focus on state-owned schools in England, I assume, so that you can reach perhaps the most disadvantaged kids. Is that correct?
That's right. So we work with non-selective state schools, both primary and secondary schools. So we work with both children preparing for the end of primary and preparing for their GCSEs in year 10 and 11 at secondary school. And we tend to work with schools that have at least double the national average of children eligible for free school meals. So those that have a particularly high percentage of disadvantaged pupils.
And tell me, in terms of a little bit of the evidence, in terms of, does tutoring work?
Yeah, it's a really fundamental question. So the Education Endowment Foundation, a really big education research body in the UK, points to really strong evidence for tutoring based on a number of studies. They suggest that an intensive term of tutoring can add up to 5 months of progress. Now, typically you'd expect people to make 1 grade's progress over a year. So if we can add...
Sorry. Say that again. So 5 months progress can be made.
Yeah, with an intensive term of tutoring. Now, we've then since done our own evaluations to see what our program is telling us. We ran a control group study, which was done by an external evaluator, and that showed that with just 7 or 8 tutoring sessions, pupils could make half a grade of progress. The schools would typically expect them to make 1 grade of progress in a year. So with just 7 or 8 sessions, we can add an extra half grade on top of that. And obviously, if you deliver more sessions, you start to see even more impact.
I mean, so I'm also now aware that there are different models of tutoring. And tell us a little bit about what's out there in terms of what we should be thinking about, because in my awareness, at least, and I'm a little bit ignorant on these things, is that tutoring is one-on-one. So when my kids have it, for example, we get a math tutor who comes home, or they go to them and they have tutoring. What other formats exist, and does the evidence bear out also for those all other formats that exist?
So one-to-one is definitely the most common model when parents are paying for it privately, but actually there isn't a great deal of evidence about the difference of one-to-one or one-to-two, as long as you're talking about small groups. So at Action Tutoring, we actually work 1-to-2 most of the time. We tend to find pupils feel more comfortable with that if they can work with a friend. And obviously it means that we can benefit more pupils. The key things that we think are really essential to the way we run our program and our model include those partnerships with schools. So we're making sure that we understand what teachers are covering in the class and that we're really well aligned with the curriculum. We provide really structured, tailored resources that have been developed by curriculum experts, again, so that we can be confident we're working on those areas that pupils really need to focus on and that are really going to benefit them. We provide training for our tutors, both initial training and then ongoing training, to make sure that they're developing on the journey. And then finally, really important for us is the impact and quality monitoring of the programme. So monitoring the quality of the tutors and assessing the impact the programme is having on pupils.
So I found it interesting you speaking about volunteer tutors. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because the question that I suppose I would love to ask, and my wife and I argue about all the time, is that what makes a really good tutor?
Mm.
Do you have an answer to that question?
I think my answer is that actually there's so many different types of person that can make a brilliant tutor. There isn't just a sort of a one size fits all approach to this. And one of the things we're really proud of at Action Tutoring is the diversity of our volunteer tutor base. Last year, the youngest was 18 and the oldest was 82. We attract students, retired volunteers, corporate volunteers. All of them need to meet a certain level of academic qualification, so we can be confident they've got the subject knowledge. But we then also look at factors such as their communication skills. You might be brilliant at maths, but actually can you make it explainable, manageable to somebody who's really struggling to grasp it and really needs it simplifying? So communication skills are really important. We look at their experience, and we also look at actually their motivation. Why do they want to come and volunteer with us? What's their reason for wanting to get involved? But the training and support that we provide for tutors, and particularly the resources that they're given, help to make it as easy as possible, that we're not asking them to go away and design complicated lesson plans. We're giving them the material that they can then adapt and work with. But definitely don't think there's only one type of tutor. If you've got a passion for working with young people, for sharing your knowledge in your subject, the chances are you could make a brilliant teacher or tutor.
And so you spoke a little bit about your work in the sense that you're going online, but you also spoke about growing. And so tell us in terms of where you're going from and to, and what support you require.
Mm. Well, the government in the UK have recently announced a national tutoring programme, which is going to support bringing tutoring to many more disadvantaged pupils. We're really delighted about this. It's obviously an issue that we've felt passionately about for a number of years, and now we're seeing the government recognising this and wanting to roll it out more widely. So whilst we're going to have to apply to be a provider of that programme, we're really hoping we'll be able to play a big part, with an ambition of at least doubling over the next academic year, and thinking about how we might expand to areas of new geographies as well. At the moment, we're mostly based in urban centres, and would love to think a bit more about how we get to the suburbs and how we reach rural areas as well. And part of that will come through our online programme, and being able to offer that, but also the opportunities that the National Tutoring Programme is bringing to make schools more aware of the benefits tutoring can bring, and to get more people interested in getting involved with organisations like ours.
I mean, but the scale of the challenge that we face in current times is so significant, Susannah. And when I looked at the national tutoring program that you spoke of, it's limited. What can be done to really ramp up efforts if this is the way that learning loss can be made up for?
Well, the big thing that we'd love to see is the national tutoring programme made into a multi-year programme. At the moment, the funding has just been committed for 1 year, and given the scale of catch-up that's needed and the attainment gap that already exists in the UK, we think pupils deserve a much longer-term sustained intervention. So we're very much hoping that if the national tutoring programme is a success, that the government will consider expanding it for multiple years to come, so that it can become really embedded in the school system as part of the offer to disadvantaged pupils.
So I know that a number of the people that watch these live streams and engage are interested in all things technology. Given that various trends have been accelerated, and you yourself described that it was always part of your strategy, but it's been brought forward. What are the lessons you've learned about going online with such a program?
Well, one was actually we were pleasantly surprised. It was more straightforward than we thought it might be. I think there's no doubt that young people have a fantastic grasp of technology, and the pupils we work with were incredibly comfortable with the idea of tutoring online and got to grips with it really, really swiftly. Tutors perhaps need a bit more support, but equally most were able to get to grips with it really very swiftly. We give pupils noise cancelling headphones, and just a simple trick like that can really help their concentration on the sessions and their engagement. And actually we found that because they're looking at a computer screen, they're not distracted by what's going on in the classroom around them in the way that sometimes they can be with face-to-face tutoring. But we've really invested in a platform that has fantastic functionality, and we think helps to get us close to face-to-face delivery as we possibly can, so pupils and tutors can interact well on it. It's got interactive whiteboard functions, they can highlight things, they can sticky notes, all those kinds of things that you might do in a face-to-face session can be replicated online. And that's something that we were really looking for. And then the other thing we obviously had to think about was safeguarding and making sure the platform would be safe and secure.
And so your volunteer base is going up from what to what? I remember there was some significant growth there.
Well, last year we had about 1,500 active volunteers across the country, spread out across our 8 geographies. We've been really encouraged that particularly since June, when the National Tutoring Programme was announced, that we've been seeing a huge uplift in volunteers coming forward and applying. But we're hoping next year we might have about 2,500 active volunteer tutors, if not more, working with us across the country.
So my friend over here, Arup Ganguly, who is a retired guy who used to work in the city, talks about tutoring. Now, if I look at someone like him, who has a great education himself, has worked in the professional services industry, how easy is it for him to sign up as a tutor?
So we have an application form on our website. Hopefully it's not too arduous to complete, but that's the first step to register your interest. Fill in the application form, tell us a bit about yourself, and one of the team will get in touch.
Fantastic. Susannah, I'm really grateful to you for what you do. I want to speak a little bit about fundraising, because I know that it's very important in these times that we all contribute. And so from those of the audience that want to contribute financially, what do they need to do apart from go to the website, as that banner says? Give us a little bit of understanding on the quantum of money you require to transform a young person's life.
So thank you for asking. Our cost-based model is that 60% of our costs are fundraised, and the remaining 40% actually come from schools contributing. And that's been a really important part of our model, that schools do buy in with some form of financial commitment, even though it's very good value for them and much cheaper than private tutoring. So we have a mixed model there. But roughly each year it costs us about £400 per pupil that we work with, to work with them on a weekly basis across a full academic year. And when you look at the difference that those grades can make for them in terms of helping them access further education, employment or training and progress in life, we think a £400 investment is incredibly good value to make sure that they're able to progress well to the next steps in life, and really worthwhile. In order to make donations, as you said, you can do it directly through our website, or people can email me directly, Susannah@actiontutoring.org.uk. I'm very happy to discuss donations.
So for £400 of my money that I donate to you can help another child improve their maths or English over a period of time, and get a massive grade improvement. That is the basic rationale.
That's right, and we work with pupils that are at risk of missing out on national standards in the UK in English and maths, and if we can just tip them over to getting that national standard, the difference that makes to their further education, employment or training is enormous.
And in terms of are you aware of similar organizations existing in other parts of the world like yourself, other charities doing the same thing?
So we have come across a few in a few other countries. We've had conversations with people in Korea and South Africa and in Sweden as well over the years. And there are a number of other organisations that also offer tutoring on slightly different models or with slightly different cohorts in the UK, particularly those perhaps offering tutoring to try and help people from disadvantaged backgrounds to progress to top universities and so on.
Yeah. Well, Susannah, thank you so much for your time today. I know that I found it quite fascinating to learn about your work. And I know that this live stream will be viewed quite a few times over the next week or so. And I certainly hope that those who are watching actually consider Action Tutoring as a worthy beneficiary of their hard-earned money. And we wish you well in what you're doing, because we recognize that these are tough times, and we all have to pull together to make sure that the most underprivileged and disadvantaged and most vulnerable youths don't get left behind. And there's a huge risk to that happening today. So thank you for everything that you do, and we look forward to having you back on this live stream. Thank you, and good afternoon to you all.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.